Greetings! I realize it has been a while since Path of Titans released an official video on how to use the replay feature, but it was quite bare bones, and while useful for just rewatching your gameplay, it is missing any instruction to do more cinematic work for those who want to make documentary-esque videos or get those particularly impressive screenshots. There is also some confusion on how exactly to make those videos in general, and I'll be covering that near the end by showing you my methods of making documentaries. This will cover the basics such as camera speed, smooth camera movement, depth of field, exposure, all that. But we'll also cover slightly more complicated things as it goes. But I will do my damnedest to make it at least sound simple. And as I said, at the end I'll show my process of making videos. For that, you'd need Microsoft Clipchamp and Metal, which is a game recording software. I don't hear highly about either of them, but that's what we're working with today. So, without further ado, let's start off with replay settings, which you're better off accessing from the main menu because you cannot change them on the fly. Under gameplay settings, you'll see your recording settings. I recommend just recording every session if you can, and if you're short on space, just give it a really short auto-delete time, as you can set here. Faster level loading will cause less lag and FPS drops when launching a replay, and is also good for space, but it comes at the cost of general accuracy and graphics quality, so be careful with it. Now, why I recommend doing this in the menu is because, as you can see, once you're in-game, you cannot change your replay settings. You can, of course, but they will not take effect until you tab out. So if you forgot to record your current session, fear not, because you can simply tab out into the character creation screen. You do not have to leave the server and then rejoin. And your new replay settings will be in effect, including recording if you were not previously recording. This works how it does because replays are recorded once per creature you are logged onto, because it would be sort of cheaty if you could record a replay of the area without ever logging in. So if you do many logins, or if you die a lot, then you can rack up a large amount of replays in a very short amount of time. I'm not sure how much space that takes, but it is something to be mindful of. So without further ado, now let's get into actually handling and manipulating the replay footage itself. When you get into the replay, it will look something like this. It will have all your default settings from when you were in-game, so the weather, time, whatever, will be accurate to when you were playing. And you can see the settings here where you can set the different time of day. This is where you are in the replay. Playback speed, which you can use to speed up or slow down the recording. So you can use your slow motion. And these two buttons, which will jump forward a small amount of time, or jump backwards a small amount of time. The freeze time and weather setting will, as you'd expect, freeze the time and weather, but if you change any of these settings while it is paused and replay it, this will not persist. Even if it is checked, you will have to reset the weather every time you press pause and play. Now let's go over the basic camera controls. Now note that this is for PC. I have no idea what other platforms have going on for their control scheme, so I apologize for that. Holding down both left and right click on your mouse will allow you to move your camera around. But to actually move, you have to use the in-game movement keys, aka WASD, spacebar to move up, and control to move down. Now to go through following and observing players. Whenever you begin, you will always have a focus player, which is going to be usually the closest player to your camera. Now, sometimes the follow button will just do nothing, so to actually follow a player, you will have to click one of these arrows, and it will focus onto the player, and as you can see, your camera will follow them, so you can orbit around them. And it will show their name here, but you can also click to show name tags, and with this you can see the age, gender, species, and health of whoever you are looking at, which can be quite useful. Now, the follow feature is only slightly buggy, so as you can see, it is not very good for cinematography because the camera will jitter around in order to follow the player, because it follows their head, and their camera movements tend to be very unpredictable for whatever software is making it follow. So, to unfollow, you will press the follow button, and then your camera should unlock. Sometimes it will throw you across the map instead of just unfollowing wherever your camera was. And in case of that, just rewalk on to a nearby player and then unfollow. And if it went wrong the first time, that should fix it. Now on to my least favorite setting to mess with because it can be very irritating, depth of field, which is unfortunate because it is very important to taking decent looking screenshots or videos. Now, depth of field, obviously, is the act of blurring distant or very close features to give, the effect of depth. For that, you are going to want to turn focal distance up very slightly, depth blur distance down very low, which will actually focus the distance instead, and you can adjust as necessary, but I recommend keeping these adjustments very minute because they are very extreme, and using depth blur radius to blur it further. I personally do not mess with sensor width, but it is very similar in depth blur. It is better for very close-up shots, though, if you would like to use it for that. I would play with most settings very minimally, because they all have very extreme effects. But if we are looking into the effects that will help your screenshots, exposure is going to be one, which, as you can see, is very drastic no matter how small you move it, will affect the amount of lighting visible in the image. Rendering gives you screen effects around it, like Vignette, which is this dark, blurry border around the edges. And Bloom Intensity, which has to do with the actual lighting. See, I turned this down and the lighting is less harsh. Aberration gives it a sort of glitch effect, which can really give images some much needed dimension. As you can see, the more you do it, the more it looks like the image sort of pops out at you. And the intensity can be changed by pulling this up and then editing the aberration offset. So you can turn this up really high, then turn this up really down low to get a cool glitch effect or something. Now, with all this, you are now prepared to take some very impressive screenshots. But that says nothing about videos, because there is one main problem when it comes to taking these videos. And that is, if you haven't noticed, as you move the camera, it moves very sharply. And while this can be nice for certain effects, it just looks very uncomfortable and jarring. It does not look good in a cinematography way most of the time. To fix that, you're going to head up here to this setting, which is very useful because you can turn off these annoying little indicators when you click this button, which will minimize this window and make for better images. And if I do not have that on, then you get this irritating little pop-up that ruins all your videos. Now, on actually smoothing your camera speed out, you will want to turn this setting very low alongside your camera speed most of the time. Now, whenever you move your camera, it will be much more languid, it will drift a little. And with this, you can pull some very natural camera angles. Turn it down further, the better it is most of the time. This applies for movement as well, so you can have very smooth movement. It's very good looking if you do it right. And I also recommend turning vertical movement speed down, so it's not as jarring either. Overall, we want a very smooth transition between anything. And keep your mouse movements very slight while you're moving the camera and looking around with it. Create a very natural angle pan. Now, those are the basics of filming documentary style in Path of Titans, at least how to do so. But there are numerous little tricks and such I've used to create a better looking documentary, which will follow. Something simple but very effective, in my opinion, is moving your mouse in slight circular motions while you have the interpolation effect on, which will give it a sort of camera shake effect, which results in a very less static scene as compared to this, which does not have very much engagement as my camera is not moving at all and there's not a huge point of interest. Another semi-important tip when it comes to camera movement is to follow the dinosaur's head. If there is a dinosaur in focus, it is best to follow their head with your camera movement very fluidly, and it will create a very natural looking fluid scene, which is much more visually interesting. When it comes to following your dinosaur, this is best done from a distance with the dinosaur in a corner or side of the screen where you can see the wide landscape, giving the illusion or appearance at least of distance being covered, and it alleviates some of the effort required to keep pace with a dinosaur because your camera speed and your dinosaur speed can be very different and creates a very awkward look when they desync. It is the very unfortunate truth that it is very difficult to make combat look exciting in Path of Titans. So the best thing you can do for this is not show it. Sort of. Show as little as you can. Tell the story mostly through the chases in between, occasional shots of jaws or wings flapping. Use sounds, distinct impacts. Position your camera to make it where you can see clipping as little as often as you can see here. I keep the camera sort of behind the hats, so every time they attack, and obviously their wings or beaks go through the Pycno, you don't really see that. And vice versa, when the Pycno charges, it will obviously go through the hats, but you don't see that from the footage shown. Instead, it just looks like they were shoved. Minimizing clipping is very difficult, but very rewarding. As much as you may be tempted to film aerial chases, action shots are absolutely best from the ground. This conveys much more size, much more power behind movements. It makes it much more intense, and to boot, it minimizes clipping. So avoid moving your camera too quickly because with high interpolation, it may suddenly jerk or roll around. With that out of the way, with the controls and techniques out of the way, now I would like to show how I personally make my own documentaries, because it may work for you. And for this, to reiterate, you would need Microsoft Clipchamp, and Metal, which are both free software. So to start with that, I would have Metal recording. I would minimize this, and I would film my shot. I would hand my camera around, make something cinematic, something dramatic, I don't know, and then I would hit the hotkey to record, which for me is F8, and it would save the last 30 seconds, but there are other length options. I just prefer to use 30 seconds because I do not like using shots shorter than 30 seconds, because then it becomes difficult to hold the viewer's attention. Then I would open Metal, go to the clip I just recorded, open in file location. I would upload the file directly to Clipchamp, and then add it onto my video. And from here, you can add your transitions. I always recommend transitions. Any music or sound effects you are going to add, volume, whatever you're going to do with it. And I would go back into the game, record my next shot, go around, and then perform the same process as the new clip will appear, obviously. Add it to my video. And I will record an entire video and upload it like this. It is very low effort, but also very easy and does not exactly make for bad videos. And with that, that is all I have to share with you. Thank you for sticking through to the end, and I hope you learned something. Happy photographing, and I hope to see some interesting documentaries from the community. Peace.